For today's video, we're going to talk about the parts and types of a fault. But first, let's define the meaning of a fault. Faults are large fractures and breaks in the Earth's crust, along which have rocks moved. It is formed because of the violent movement of the Earth's surface. According to seismologists, faults can be classified as an active or inactive. Active faults are faults that generate earthquakes and occur displacement. In addition, faults are said to be active if there has been recorded or observed movement for the last 10,000 years. While inactive faults is completely the opposite. They are zones that do not generate earthquakes and those that had not displayed any movement for a minute. Now let's move on onto the parts of the fault. The first one is the footwall. It is the surface of the block that looks like a foot and it is located below the plane of the fault. It moves horizontally, vertically, or in both directions relative to the hanging wall. Speaking of the hanging wall is the surface of the block that is located on the top of the plane of the fault. It moves horizontally, vertically, or in both directions relative to the footwall. The next one is the fault line. It is where the evidence or the trace of the fault along the surface. The fault plane, it is the plane that extends into the surface of the earth and along which slippage happens. And lastly, the fault scarp. It is the face of an exposed block. Let's move on to the types of faults. Let's use this model as a representation. The block F2 will represent the hanging wall and the block F1 and F3 will represent the footwall. The first type of fault is called the reverse fault. Reverse fault forms under the compressional forces wherein the plates were being pushed against each other or they are being squeezed inwards. As a result, the hanging wall moves upward along the fault plane. This mainly occurs at convergent plane boundaries. As you can see, when I push the two footwalls inward, the hanging wall moves upward. This is what happens on reverse fault. The best example of this is the Lusatian fault found in Germany. The second type of fault is called the normal fault. It forms when tensional forces start gradually pulling the plates apart and splitting the rocks away from each other. As a result, it causes the hanging wall to drop down. This mainly occurs on divergent plate boundaries. As you can see, when the footwall splits apart, the hanging wall will drop down. A best example of this are the deep sea ridges in the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. The last type of fault is called the strike slip fault. It's the type of fault that is under the shearing forces or also known as sliding forces. This is where the plates are sliding past each other horizontally. It can be identified as a right lateral wherein the right block moves towards you and the left block moves away. A left lateral when the left block moves towards your direction and the right block moves away. It normally occurs at transform plate boundaries. The best example of this is the San Andreas Fault located in California. Presented by Bernalisa from 8 Mendel. I hope you enjoy watching this. Bye!